Hi everyone. In this video we're going to take our bike and our chair from the previous lessons and bring them into a new scene, add materials, lighting, and render them out into a final image. Let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is go back into our old files like the bike and export the bike into a separate file. So I'm going to go into the last file that I had for this bike and I'm going to select everything, edit, delete by type, history, modify, freeze transformations, and I'm also going to Control G and group the entire thing. And let's rename this group the bike. So now I'm going to select it by this and go to File, Export Selection, and I like to make a folder just called export. So in this case I actually have that folder already. So let's save in the export, and from file type let's just select Maya binary. So let's call it the bike.mb. Now other programs that you may export to might use some of the other formats like OBJ, which I tend to use a lot. But if you're only exporting a file to open within Maya, you can just continue using either the MyASCII or the Maya binary. So let's call this the bike, and we'll export selection. Let's take a look. Include these channel inputs, constraints. Okay, selection. So you can see down here it made a folder called the bike. Not a folder, a file called the bike with just this bike in it. So let's also go to, let's open the chair file. So if we can browse to it, let's see this bumper chair. And so we have this. So let's also open up our outliner, select everything, and press Control G to group, and let's rename this group the chair. And so then with the chair selected, we can go to File, Export Selection, and let's go to our export folder, and let's call this the chair.mb. Okay, and so finally what we're going to do is let's go and open our file that we set up for rendering a couple lessons ago, the one with the primitives and the triangles in it. So let me browse to that real quick, and let's see which one that is. So if you remember this scene, we're going to use everything, we're going to actually just use the lighting and the way that the scene is set up in our render settings with Mental Ray. So what we can actually do is go in and delete everything else in Outliner. So let's go in and delete the cube, all of this stuff, pyramids, let's delete those, and we can scrub the thing and make sure we just have the room right here, and eventually we're going to replace the room. Okay, so it still renders, and you should have your render settings still saved from the previous lesson. So refer to that series of videos in case you lost the settings. Additionally, we can save our presets right now. So in our render settings up here, we can go to presets, save setting as preset, and let's call this basic mental ray. We can save the preset. So now no matter what file you're in, you can always go into load preset and go into basic mental ray and load these settings. And these settings we didn't spend too much time on, but they were fairly fast and allowed us to render quickly. So with this as our base scene, let's go in and save this file as something else. Let's just call it final scene.jpg. Video011. Okay, so now that we have this, let's bring in our bike and some of the other stuff. And just as a note, I know ahead of time that the bike and the chair are going to be maybe the wrong size because we weren't necessarily modeling with a correct scale in mind, so we're going to have to move them around and scale them a bit. So let's go to File, Import, browse your export folder if you're not there already. In this case, I'm there. So let's click the chair and import it. And you can grab the chair like this, and let's actually grab it from the outliner by clicking this button to bring up the outliner and making sure you click on the chair, the chair, and press W to move it. And let's center the scene a little bit, and let's drag up. So we bring the chair up, and we can also look at it in side view real quick by clicking this button. And let's go into one of these views and just make sure the chair isn't sitting too far below and too far up. It's not. Let's make sure it's not floating. So you can see if you get in real close, it's floating a little bit. So we'll just drag it down slightly. Press spacebar and get out of here. And we'll move it over to the side a little bit, and we might have to scale the whole thing down in relation to the bike if the bike is the wrong size. So let's go into File, Import, the bike. Click Import. And so now the bike appears in the scene, but it's a bit out of scale in relation to everything else. So let's open our outliner back up and grab the bike that way. The reason I'm using the outliner to grab it is because the bike is actually still separate parts, and if you open this plus sign, you can see all the other separate parts. So grabbing it this way by clicking the outliner lets you grab all of them at the same time without having to, let's say, combine them all into one piece. Combine the entire model into one piece. So now what I'm going to do is take this bike and make sure it's sort of sitting on the ground, and let's move it up against this wall. And let's also F to center, and let's scale it down a little bit in relation to the chair. So let's also start framing up a potential view. And I think let's move the chair a little to the corner of the room. So again, I'm using the outliner to select the chair, and let's put it back there, and let's even turn it a little bit. I'm going to go to Modify Center Pivot so that my turn is from the center of the chair. Maybe do that. And I think I'm also going to duplicate the chair by pressing Control D and then dragging it out, dragging the copy out. And so now you'll notice I have the chair and the chair 1. And so let's take this copy of the chair and rotate it the other way and put it like that. And let's also begin to lock in our camera. So something like this, and we can select this icon to select the camera, and we can press, well, let's go back to frame 1. So I want to overwrite the existing frame, and maybe something like this. So I'm just holding down Alt, middle mouse, just the same zoom and tumble commands to set up this view. And I'm going to press this button to select the camera, then I'm going to press S to save my camera position. So now when I rotate around, I can just drag and it sort of pops back into that same position. So let's take this bike again, and let's take a closer look. It's still standing up by itself. We can move it like this, and why don't we even lean it up against the wall a little bit so it's not magically standing. So we can lean it somewhat like this, and then while it's lean, let's go into tool settings and let's go under axis, under move settings, axis orientation. Let's go to world so that we move it perpendicular to the ground, parallel with the ground, so we can lean it in. And I can tell right when it hits the handlebar, hits the wall, is where I want to stop. And then I also probably want to rotate it a little bit so that the back tire hits the wall too. So I want it to be leaning against both the handlebar and the back tire, just slightly, to give it a bit of perspective. And so I click the timeline and it pops back into view. So now let's take a look at this room. I think at some point I want to put a window back here or back there. The idea is that this is somebody's living room and we're going to detail this out with materials and textures. So I think the first thing we can do is maybe raise the walls a little bit. I'm going to grab this edge and press W, and let's just drag the walls up. Something like that. And actually, in this case, we can, now that the walls are this tall, we can drag out and pan a little bit. And why don't we select the camera again and lock our view this way. And so then let's also, for now, let's move this light over here. And let's also go and add a ceiling to this room. So we can click this edge and let's go to shift right click, extrude edge. And then we can click and drag. If you turn on your snap, you can snap it to this. And so now we have a ceiling to the room. Okay, I'm going to save my file here. So let's also open up our render settings, and under common, let's just make sure we're at something like HD 720. So that's 1280 by 720. And let's also make sure you have your view camera settings resolution gate and your gate mask unchecked. They should be intact from the previous version of the file. Please refer to that video in case you're wondering how I got this green box. So let's also press this button and do a quick render test. So the lighting should be the same as the previous file, and there should be no material on the bike or the chair. Okay, so now we have a room with the bike and the chairs in it with no real materials on anything. So let's begin to set up the lighting a little better next. So let's actually make the bike a little smaller. I still think it might be kind of large in relation to the chair, so I'm going to go and select the bike and scale it down just a little bit, maybe like that, and then we'll move it back down, turn my snap off so that it's leaning back against the wall again. And let's take a look. So now it's floating, so we'll move it so that the saddle hits it and leave it like that. So now let's go in and why don't we add some windows into this room. So I think the first thing we're going to do is let's edge here. Let's insert an edge loop. So let's make 3 windows. So drag and click to the bottom edge, and I think that's something like that is going to be the bottom edge of the window. Something like this will be the top edge, of the window. So you notice it's wrapping around both walls. And then, so let's go into here and press Q to quit, but then let's go to edge mode and let's shift insert edge loop tool options. And let's go with multiple edge loops, and let's go with 3. Wait, what? Sorry, 2. Let's try 2 and equal multiple edge loops, use equal multiplier, autocomplete fixed quads, and I'm going to click up here. So it's going to do that for me. And so it's going to divide this wall into 3 equal lateral sorry, not equilateral, just equal sized spaces, and then I can press Q to quit. And then now let's go into face mode and select each of these faces, 1, 2, 3, and shift right click and extrude face, and let's keep faces together off, and then we'll go and scale down these faces so that we can make a window like this, and maybe they're a bit narrower like that, and just a bit taller like that. Okay, so I'm going to press Q to quit, and then let's just press delete to delete those faces. We'll come in and give the actual window some more detail at some point, but for now this is just to get light into the scene. So I'm going to click and select the timeline so it pops back into place. And I think, you know what, let's make the window slightly wider. So I'm just double clicking the edges, and then I can switch to scale mode and drag the red arrow and just make them just a little bit wider. Press Q to quit. So let's go to create lights, and let's select under mental ray, let's select environment sky, and then let's go to create lights physical sun. So this icon appears here, which is the sun direction, and then you'll also notice that if you expand this, there's under default lights, this sun direction also appears. So for now, let's take this area light and actually let's delete it, and then let's render the scene and see what it looks like with the sunlight and the sky lighting it. So pretty similar, except we have some sunlight coming through the windows now, and the rest of the scene is a little bit darker than before. So for now, why don't we close this and Control Z, and let's leave the light in the scene. So I'm gonna undo how I deleted the light, because we don't have enough light in the scene right now. So that's why it looked a bit blockier, and I'm going to move the light more towards the middle of the room there. And so let's try to render again. So let's go in and tweak some of these light settings. So let's select this sun icon, which is a bunch of little lines, and under sun direction, under rotate, let's leave this at -30, but let's add this in the Y box. Let's add 30. Let's make it 30.0. You'll see it rotate slightly, and maybe in Z let's also do 30. So in your MIA physical sky tab, make sure, let's say sun direction, let's add, let's change this third box to 1, and let's uncheck Y is up if it's checked. Your scene should be set as Z up. So let's render and take a look at what these changes did to the scene. So now you can see the shadows are a bit longer. You can see some sort of horizon line that will eventually change. But overall the scene is much brighter since the sun is going in the correct direction now. So now that we have some basic lighting in the scene, we can go in and detail some of this environment to make it look a bit more realistic. So let's double click these window openings and go to Shift right click and extrude these out a little bit to give the sill some depth. Something like that. Press Q to quit. And why don't we also go up to this edge and insert an edge loop, insert an edge loop options. Let's go into relative distance and let's add something about there. Then we can double click our new face all the way around and Shift right click, extrude face, and let's extrude in a little bit like this. We can give it a bit of a crown molding effect. And now let's go in and draw some panes to the glass. So I'm going to do a new tool. Let's press Q to quit out of this extrude. And let's hold down spacebar and let's go into mesh. Mesh tools, create polygon. Okay, and now with that command active, I'm going to turn my snap off on, and I'm going to click once in this corner, once in this corner, once in this corner, and once in this corner, and Q to quit. And so I just made a new polygon in the scene. So, and I also snapped it to the window there. So now for this, I'm going to, let's go into edge, and let's divide this into, let's go into insert edge loop, multiple edge loops, and let's do this at 1. So I'm going to go like this, and then like this, and then I may divide it again and again like that. Q to quit. And then I'm going to double click, select all the faces, and Shift right click, extrude face. And then I'll go down to scale before pulling it, and I'll scale it down like that, and turn my keep faces together off. And so I want to scale it so maybe it's something like that. So let's press Q to quit. So let's select the object again. And what I want to do now is both extrude the thickness of the mullion, but then also leave these surfaces behind for glass. So what I want to do is let's Alt H to isolate this, and I'm going to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and go to Edit Mesh under Face, and let's go to Extract, but let's go to the Extract options and make sure Separate Extracted Faces is checked and Offset 0. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to separate the mullions from the windowsill, so you can see that like it still leaves that intact. So I'm going to Control H to hide that, and then since these are all separate objects, I want to combine them by dragging across and Shift right click, combine. And so now it's one object even though they're separate floating objects. And later on we can assign a glass material to this if we want. But for now, let's display show all, Oh, display show all, and let's take this glass and put it on a new layer. Click here and name it glass, and turn it off. So now we're left with these mullions that we can actually double click, and let's extrude these inwards a little bit to give it some thickness. Oh, I needed to turn my snap off, so let me drag it like this. Okay, so now that we have that, we can also turn back on the glass, select both this and the glass, so I meant both the mullions and the glass, press W to move, and let's move our pivot point to somewhere where we can copy it repeatedly to the next window over. So with both of these selected, let's turn the snap on and press D, and let's move our pivot point to there. So now I can Control D to duplicate it, and then snap to this windowsill to copy it over, and Control D and snap to the windowsill to copy it over again. And then now I'm going to turn my glass layer off, and it turns off all 3 layers of glass. Let's drag to pop the view back into to center the view again, and let's render and see how this scene is looking with this additional detail. Let's go in now and add some textures to the scene. I'm going to select this floor, and actually before I do that, let's separate this floor from the rest of the scene. So I'm going to go to face mode and select all these 3 faces, and I go to mesh, separate, or actually edit mesh, extract. So now I have this separate from the rest of the walls. And eventually I'm going to do that with the ceiling and the walls, depending on what other materials I want. So now I'm going to right click and let's assign new material. And over here, let's click on our Mental Ray tab and click MIA Material X. Under the MIA Material X1 tab, let's just call this, let's rename it floor, wood floor, enter. And in the diffuse tab under color, let's click this checker box. And this create render node will pop up, and we want to browse to file. And so this will pop you into your file attribute. So under file attributes, under image name, let's click this little folder icon and browse to our file. So source images, and let's find this wood file. And let's make sure to click this icon here that says textured, and this will reveal the wood file in the wood texture in your viewport. So taking a look at this wood texture, we can go into place 2D texture, and under repeat UV, let's turn this up a little bit. Let's turn this to maybe 3 and 3 to change the size of the wood texture. And so now let's take a look and render. So let's also go and add a bump map to this wood material. So uh, shift, so right click and go to material attributes, and under wood floor, scroll down to bump and open that up, and overall bump, let's click this checkerboard icon, click on file, and under file 2, let's go to image name and browse to our bump file, which will be here. Click OK, and then select off the object, select the object again. Let's go to material attributes, and under overall bump, let's click file 2 and click this arrow. So now you'll see this tab called place 2D texture, and we want to match it to the placement of our diffuse texture, which was the actual wood image itself. So we're going to turn this also to 3 and 3 to match the tiling. And now we're going to click, let's render the frame to take a look at it. So I can tell by the preview that the bump is a little too large. So I need to turn down the bump value. So let's hold down escape to cancel out of the rendering and close this window. So let's select the floor, go to right click material attributes. In your wood floor tab, press this button, and then this button, and then this button again, and then we'll reveal our bump 2D1 node, our bump 2D1 tab. And so let's turn bump depth down to 0.05. We click enter. And now let's render again. And we can see that hopefully the wood material will be much more subtle. Okay, great. So let's go in now and texture this bike. Let's select bike frame, press F to center the view, and right click, assign new material, and let's click our mental ray tab on the left here and go to MI car paint fen X. And so in our attribute editor, in this tab, in our base color, let's do a blue that's something. Let's slide this HSV color. Make sure you're on HSV. And so let's slide this something like this, like 225. And our lit color, let's make it something like 191. So for the wheels, let's click this. Let's select both wheels and maybe the handlebars too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and right click and assign new material. And let's go to mental ray, MIA material X, and let's turn our color all the way down like this to almost black. Let's turn reflection, well actually let's leave reflection like this and turn our glossiness all the way down to something like this, and then turn our color to something super low like that. So for the rims, let's do some chrome. Let's select this rim and this rim, and also how about this crank and the chainring itself, and right click and assign new material, and let's go to mental ray, MIA material X, and let's remember to name some of these. Let's just call this one chrome. And under presets, let's click preset and let's go to chrome and replace all selected. So let's also select this saddle. Well, let's go and select the handlebar and go to material attributes. And let's rename this material black rubber. And so we can select our saddle now, right click, and assign existing material, and let's assign it black rubber. And let's select the rail to this, and right click, assign existing material chrome. And now let's take a look. Well, let's select these hubs. Well, the hubs. So press F. So let's select this one and select this one and this half. And right click, assign existing material chrome. So let's jog the timeline, and we can render again and see what these materials look like. So that looks okay. I can tell that even though the rims are assigned as the same material, one rim is brighter than the other one because of the angle that the bike is sitting at. But we can go back and fix that in a little bit. I think the other thing we want to do is assign that same black rubber material to the pedals, and maybe we can assign a new material to the chain as well. So let's do that. So I'm going to close this out of here, and let's select the pedals and go to F, and let's select both pedals. Select this one, and I think we combine this one. So let's go to Mesh Separate, and then you'll have to press 3 to smooth them again. And so we can select both pedals now, and let's assign a new material under Mental Ray, MIAX, and let's make it kind of dark. And let's turn reflectivity down and glossiness down. And let's also make sure that this back pedal, now we separated it, let's make sure, let's assign the existing material, let's assign it as chrome. Okay, so that should be good for the bike. And of course we can go in and at some point later assign more detailed materials. We can tweak a lot of these. I'd like to actually, let's do that now. I'd like to separate the stem and the bike, the seat post, as chrome materials. So what I did was Alt H to isolate the frame. And let's look at it on one. And so in face mode, we'll cross window drag here, and also cross window drag here. And let's go to Mesh, Edit Mesh. Under Face, let's extract these. And press 3 to smooth the frame, and 3 to smooth the stem, and 3 to smooth the seat post. And select the seat post and the stem, and right click and assign existing material, and we'll assign it to the chrome as well. So now we go to Display, Show All, and let's render again. So I'm still not too happy with the way the rims are looking, the wheels are looking on the bike. So let's go ahead and select this bike, and under my channel box, let's turn the Z rotation back to 0, because I feel like that's changing the reflection on the bike. And let's also give the wheel rims a little bit of a less of a shiny material. So I'm going to select both rims and right click, and let's assign a new material. And under mental array, let's go to MIA material X, and in our MIA material X, let's rename this to bike wheels. And under presets, let's go to satin metal and replace all selected. And so these presets, there's a lot of really useful materials, and all it does is slide these sliders around. So a lot of times I like to start with the preset, then modify it, tweak little things to get exactly what I want. But for now, let's just leave it on this preset. So let's render this out and see if it looks any better. So you can tell already that the bike rims are looking much more evenly lit. One's not super white and the other one isn't gray. So this is already looking better. And then there's enough differential between the seat post and the stem where it looks pretty good. So why don't we go ahead and assign the chrome material to these two leather chairs. So why don't we go ahead and select both of these chair bases and right click, assign existing material, chrome, and let's select both seats and the pillows and assign new material under mental array, MIA material X, and let's call this leather seat. And we're going to leave the color as it is, but let's turn down the glossiness all the way to something like this, 0.2, and reflectivity, we'll turn it down to 0.1, and we'll leave color as it is, like that. And so let's scrub to get back in the scene. Also, let's separate out the ceiling now by going into face mode and selecting the face, going to edit mesh, face, and then extract. And then now let's make the ceiling white. So assign new material. So this time let's just use a regular old Lambert, and we'll turn the Lambert color to something almost white, like that. And let's select these, the mullions, and let's assign a new material. And again, let's do a regular Lambert and drag the color down like this, something like that, and let's call these mullions in our name. And so once again, maybe we can even reframe the scene a little now that we have a better idea of what is going to be in the scene. So maybe something like that. And select the camera and press S to update. Maybe get a little bit more of the tire. Maybe go down a little bit. Press S, view, select camera, press S again. And now let's render it and take a look. Okay, that's looking really good. So let's make a carpet for the center of the room. Under modeling, polygons, actually create polygon primitive, plane, and let's go Z, make sure in Z up, width divisions 12, height divisions 12, and create. And let's scale it up a little. So maybe it's about that large. Let's check what it looks like in the view there. It could be a little larger, just so it's at the edge of the chairs. And let's Alt-H to isolate the view. Go into face mode, double click, shift, right click, and let's extrude this carpet up just a little bit so it's higher than the floor. And we can leave it on the default material for now. So at this point, let's load our fur tool. So if you don't have a tab that says fur here, I want you to click this little icon of the gear, and we go to load shelf, and in program files, Autodesk Maya script shelves, you're going to click FX shelf fur in case you haven't loaded it already. So the fur tab will appear, and under fur you're going to select your plane, and then let's go to this one called sheep. And so normally this is for animating, animal fur and grass, but we're going to use it as carpet. We're going to use the sheep fur preset as carpet. So click that, and it looks like nothing happens, but in your outliner you can see that this fur feedback node appears. And we're going to select our carpet shape, and let's move over to this tab called sheep, right? And I already have a preset set up, and I'm going to walk you through the preset because I had to figure out some of the settings, because by default the fur is way out of scale and it takes some tweaking to get there. So I'm going to load my preset and walk you through it. So the first thing I did was I turned density up to 120,000, my global scale down to 0.2. You can see that P-plane is in this box of the assigned surfaces, so you know that your plane is the plane being assigned the fur to. So going down here, your map width and your map height should be on 256. And let's make your base color something like this. So the default, I think, sheep fur look like this, but let's bring it down to about here. And length, let's move down to 0.5. And what else did I change? The base width, I dragged it all the way to the right, so it's 0.1, and the tip width, I dragged it to 0.1. And that's the only thing I changed. There's a lot of curling. Oh, and maybe I adjusted... Oh, the base curl and the tip curl, I pulled it down to about 0.1, so it wasn't as curly. A lot of different attributes you can assign and tweak and also animate. But that's all I changed to get this to look like fur. And then when you're done adjusting all these settings, you can save your own preset by clicking the preset button and save fur description preset. And in this case, I'm going to call it carpet 1, and I save attribute preset. So this goes beyond, it extends to other files because it saves it in your presets folder and not just the file itself. So if you were working on something else and you wanted to assign the same fur, you could just load the preset from there. So now that that's assigned, let's take a look. Let's render. So I'm going to bring up my render view, which is like this, which is this clapboard with the eyeball on it. And I'm going to show you a trick right here. So that's what the carpet looks like. I rendered this ahead of time. But I'm going to show you this render region button, which is cool because it lets you render only the region that you select. So you can click and drag to make a red box. And so I'm going to click and drag over this thing, make a little rectangle, and it's only going to render what's within the box there. So this comes in handy when you know the rest of the scene hasn't changed and you want to render it quicker, because this fur does actually add quite a bit of rendering time to your scene, so you might not always have to re-render the bike or something. So once you draw that box, you click this button instead of this button, which is render the entire frame. This is render the region. So I'm going to render the region right now by clicking this box. So now let's go and re-render the entire image, and I want you to go to your render settings here, and under quality filtering, I want you to change the filter size down to about 1.5. This should make the image much sharper. So let's close and render again by pressing this button. So I think what else this scene needs is maybe a painting on the wall. So let's go back into modeling and polygons. Let's create polygon primitive. Let's go to plane options, and let's turn width and height down to 1 again, and X axis, and create. So now we have this plane here, and we can double click it, we haven't done this for a while, and call this painting. And press W to move the object, and let's put it maybe up against right here, and we'll scale it maybe up a little, and maybe out a little, like this. Okay, let's Alt-H to hide everything except the frame, F to zoom in, and let's Shift right click and extrude this face, then scale it down a little. So we're going to make this frame here, and Q to quit. And I can tell there's like a double surface here because of that flickering. So I'm going to go in and delete this back face. So now when I delete it, the back turns black. And I'm going to select this and go to Edit Mesh, Extract. And so this will be the canvas. And let's extrude this and make this the frame. So I'm going to Shift right click, Extrude Face, and come out like this. Just a little bit. And Q to quit. And so for this frame, let's assign it that same chrome material. Actually, let's assign it the same material as the bike wheels. Kind of that. And then for the painting itself, we're going to right click, assign new material, and let's just leave it on Lambert right here, and let's call it painting. And for the diffuse color, I'm going to click this checkerboard, go to File, and Image Name. So I found a public domain, a Van Gogh painting, and so I'm going to assign it to that image, and as you can see, it came in sideways. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the plane, go to UV, and rotate the UV, like go into the options there. Let me do that again. UV, rotate options, and type 90 and click rotate UVs. And so you can press, now it's upside down, but we can press G to continue rotating it till it's right side up. Okay, so Control Shift H, and we toggle the timeline there, and let's make sure it's actually up against the wall here. It's floating a little. I'm going to select both of these things and move them back so that they appear in the wall. But then I'm also going to grab the painting itself, wherever it is, right here, and I'm going to move it out of the wall. So just so it sits slightly above the wall. So now I'm going to press this button to open the render view, and I'm going to use that render region thing. So I'm going to click and drag where I think that the painting's going to be out there. So I only want to render that because the rest of the scene is okay. So let's click this button to render the region. So the painting itself is looking kind of dark, and I don't think the frame is thick enough. It doesn't look like it's really sitting off the wall right now. So let's go in and see what we can do about that. I'm going to actually just minimize this window because I'm going to render the exact same region once I make these changes. So I'll press F to zoom in. And let's Alt-H this and select and double click so I select all these, and now I'm going to drag out like this. So let's make it a really sort of thick frame. And then Control-Shift-H to reveal the wall. And now let's grab both the painting and the frame and move it forward so that it's got much more of a bite, and we can even push the painting back in a little more. With my painting still selected, I want to go into my attribute editor and move to my painting material. And remember when we plugged in the image to the color tab, let's click this little arrow here to bring up the actual image. And under, so you can see its location right there, and under color balance here, let's drag this exposure thing so the image is just a little brighter to about maybe, yeah, 2.0. And so let's snap the timeline again, and let's bring up our render view, and let's click this button to render just that region again. Okay, that's looking much better. So I actually don't like how the frame is looking. It's a bit too shiny. So I'm going to assign a new material, Mental Ray MIA Material X. And let's just call this one Picture Frame. And let's just make it a default sort of dark glossy black. And let's bring up our window thing, and let's just render out that region again. Let's go in and turn down the reflection. So material attributes, and under glossiness, let's turn this all the way down like to 0.25, and let's render again. I just realized that the bicycle is still a bit embedded into the wall right here. So I'm going to move that out a little bit, like that. And then I also want to go and let's soften some of these edges up on this window sill. So Alt-H. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to select these edges, and then shift right click, and we're going to go to bevel edge options and fractional, and leave everything. Let's leave everything by default. So fractional, and that's how you load default, by the way. You go to edit, reset settings. So I'm going to bevel, and let's turn number of segments to like 3. And then maybe 7. And then fraction at 0.5, and maybe 0.2. Yeah, I didn't want something so dramatic. So fraction, 0.2 segments, 5, auto fit on, Q to quit. So sometimes you can add these bevels to soften edges up. Control Shift H. So finally, why don't we add a small coffee table on the carpet here? So I'm going to go to create polygon primitives. Let's start with the plane again. Let's undo that and create polygon primitives plane, and let's do Z up. So with it selected, it's below the ground right now, so you don't see it. So I'm going to go into outliner and press W, and then I'm going to move it up. So let's scale it up to about maybe something like that. I'm going to F to zoom in. Let's make it a bit more rectangular. Let's put it closer to the chairs. Okay, that seems like it's okay. So while it's still a polyplane, let's add some subdivisions. Let's do 4, maybe 12 and 12. Okay, so Q to quit. And let's now click here and double click here, double click here, and double click here, and double click here. And now let's keep double clicking to, we're going to pull out this middle part because I want the middle of the coffee table to be glass. So I'm clicking here and I'm clicking at the end and double clicking. Double click. And then let's go to edit mesh, extract. And so now I have these two pieces. So now I'm going to take this piece and let's extrude this. Let's extrude it down. Something like that. And then let's grab these 4 corners while still in face mode and extrude down again to the ground. And then at the same time, I'm also, before I finish the command, I'm also going to scale the legs down so they taper a bit like that. And then drag them up, and then Q to quit. And then I'm also going to, in face mode, double click and shift right click and face normals, reverse normals. So now I'm going to select the glass, press F, and let's move it down a little bit. Just slightly below, so there's that nice sort of subtle edge to it. And I'm also going to double click it and shift right click and extrude it. Let's extrude it up, just so I don't want to flip the normals, and let's move it back down again. So you can see the glass is just slightly thick like that, and move it down again. And so let's take this coffee table and assign it, let's just make it a glossy white. So assign new material, mental array, MIA material X, and let's go over to the material and just call it coffee table. And I think the defaults are okay. Let's turn glossiness down to like 0.4, reflectivity down to also maybe 0.3. And let's select the glass and assign new material. Pencil ray, MIA, material X. And let's just rename this to glass. And let's go into our presets and let's select glass physical and replace. So also what we want to do is let's bevel this table to give it a slightly round edge because it's not going to be perfectly sharp. So let's shift right click. It's actually, yeah, shift right click and let's double click here, double click here. Let's select all the edges we want to bevel. So let's do this edge, so the top edge, and then also these corners. So I'm double clicking these corners like this. And then I also want to click these corners like this. So remember, at any time if you accidentally click an edge you don't want, you can Control Z to deselect it. I think these are all the edges I want. There's one more. Okay, so shift right click, bevel edge. And now let's do fraction 0.2 again. Segments 5. 4. And maybe we turn the fraction up to maybe 4? Sure. Okay, that looks okay. So now we can maybe reposition the table slightly so it doesn't block the base of the chairs that we spent some time on. Maybe something like that. And we can save the file. And let's render out the scene one last time. So in the next video, we're going to take this image into Photoshop and lay it out as if it was portfolio. I think I just want to quickly talk about rendering size. So this image is being rendered at 1280 pixels by 720 pixels. To give you some idea, some of these other settings, like HD, for example, HD 1080 is 1920 by 1080, which is what most television is broadcast at. And for print, because print is such higher resolution than looking at something on screen, you do, you figure out how high you're printing it, if it's at 150 dpi or 300 dpi, and then you multiply the 300 by how big your paper is. So if you have a piece of paper that's 11 by 17, so if it's so if you're doing landscape format, so if you have a piece of paper that's 17 inches and you want to render it at 150 dpi, which I'd say would be the minimum. So you multiply that by 150. So that 2550 is the width that you would need to render your image at. So to do that, you can, so now that you know what 2550 is, you can click this box that says maintain width and height ratio and type in 2250. No, sorry, it was 2550. 2550. and you can see that the other number changes because you've clicked this box. And so you can click render, and it will take a great deal longer, but you'll get a much higher resolution image. So why don't we close our window, and then in this render view go to File, Save Image, and let's save it as I'm going to just name it something, shot 1, and let's save it as a PSD, and make sure in your save mode, let's go to Save Color Managed Image and click OK. So in the next segment, I'm going to show you how to bring your image and edit it in Photoshop, but then also I'm going to show you first an optional way of rendering something out with render passes. So let's take a break, and I'll see you in the next lesson.